A very good evening to you all. I hope you are doing well. I would like to start with thanking our honorable guest today, Dr. Obaidul Hamid sir, from the University of Queensland, Australia, who was my teacher actually at University of Dhaka, though unfortunately I couldn't take any course with sir. But we got to travel in a study tour together, and I have very fond memories of that experience. And thank you very much, sir, for presenting this webinar for us today. The title of this presentation is Learning to Write or Writing to Resist, Linguistic Resistance and Assertion of Self by a Primary School Student. So the presentation will be about 40-45 minutes long, and we will have a question answer session at the end of the presentation. And you can write your questions in the chat box throughout the session. So I would like to request my dear colleague, Dr. Shaila Sultana, to introduce our guest today.
Assalamu alaikum. It's always a pleasure introducing Obaid, specifically because he's someone very close to our heart. I met him first in Australian High Commission, Obaid, if you remember. And we were Ausaid scholars along with Nevin Appa, Raqib and Urmi. And ever since, our relationship has strengthened through our visits to Monash and Deakin universities, lamb and cabbage curry at Wellington residence, and then my relationship with his wife, Ifat, an academic and a scholar in her own rights. And professionally, all of us have grown together since our Melbourne days, and our relationship has strengthened ever since, more because of our interest in applied linguistics and TESOL. The Department of English and Humanities, University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh has always shown immense interest in Obaid's work. And MA in Applied Linguistics and TESOL students have been encouraged by his work. Hence, it is a delight to host the event on behalf of DH ULAB. In his recent publication, an autoethnography of a Musafir life exploring English language education, published in the Routledge Handbook of English Language Education in Bangladesh, he stated, quotation, quote, I have been associated with Bangladesh ILT in different capacities, as a learning actor studying in the education system, as a pedagogical actor contributing to the teaching of English and to the studies of language and language education, and as an epistemic actor trying to understand and develop insights into various topics in the field. I have experienced the field as an insider as well as an outsider, learning, teaching, and researching ELT from within Bangladesh, and studying and researching the same from outside the country. The specific construction of my being in the world is an outcome of my acquaintance with an investment in English. If English has served as a catalyst in my mobility, it has also contributed to driving me out of home and rendered me a Musafir. There seems to be no way of returning, as the home that I had known is home no more. So from this introductory paragraph of his recent publication, we know that in his life trajectories, he has become an outstanding academic, scholar, researcher. He is a Musafir, no doubt. However, I personally feel, even though he is a Musafir located in Shat Samudre Tero Nodir Par, he is deeply rooted in Bangladesh. That is why he can never say no to us whenever we ask him to join us for academic activities. So today he's going to present again one of his phenomenal work, Learning to Write or Writing to Resist, Linguistic Resistance and Assertion of Self by Primary School Student. Welcome, Obaid.
Okay, thank you very much, Shalapa. Assalamu alaikum and good evening to everyone. Before I start, I would like to thank the organizers at ULAB for giving me this opportunity to share with you some of my works. Particularly, I must thank Dr. Farzana Hafsa, who has supported me over the past few weeks, and also Professor Murtaza, who extended the invitation and provided necessary encouragement for doing it. And I would also like to thank all of you for joining the session today, taking the time. I understand that things are really, really difficult at the moment. Right now, we are in Brisbane on the second day of a new 3-day lockdown, which is in a way good for us for doing this kind of activity, but I do understand that this is really a difficult time. So thank you very much for joining the session. It's a bit late for me, to be honest. 10 p.m. is my bedtime, but I hope I can survive the hour. But if I am not in my best mode, please forgive me. Okay, as I said, we are in a new lockdown. I hope things haven't got any worse in Bangladesh. Of course, we've been following things as they're unfolding in Bangladesh and other places in the world. Now, the topic of this talk today, as Farzana has already mentioned, it's learning to write or writing to resist. It's actually about children's writing, and I'm a bit hesitant, not very confident about how you would appreciate the topic, mainly because I'm not sure how many of you have been working with children or researching children. That's one of the concerns that I have had. Another thing is, I understand that almost all of us are located at the university and we mainly work with adults. So we may not have had the opportunity to work with children or researching children. So that's the concern that I have. And I must also acknowledge that this is not going to be a very scholarly presentation. This will be a work in progress. I'm actually working on the paper. So any feedback that you provide will actually help me to shape the paper that I'm thinking about in relation to this presentation in particular. Okay, so if you find the talk irrelevant, if it is not interesting, you can simply switch off. That's one of the best things about, participating in webinars, and you are not going to harm anyone. You don't have to seek permission for that. Okay, so with that, if you are all set, I would like to share my screen. Okay, so can you see the slides?
Yes, sir.
I always have these issues with, okay, so yes, okay, so if you're all set, I would like to present before you a hypothetical situations. Imagine a situation where you are asking one of your children to write something every day. How would they respond to that request or parental imposition? Will they like it? What do you think? Will they like it? Maybe, perhaps
no,
not.
they won't.
It's hard to know. Okay.
They won't.
Will they do it?
It depends.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Well, assuming they do it, will they do it happily or reluctantly? Okay, and again, assuming they are, they're happy to do it, or happily or reluctantly, what will they write about? How will they write? So these are questions, and we don't have clear answers to these questions. So the only suggestion that I can make is, you have to do an experiment to know, how they like it, how they would respond to it, and what they would write if they're going to do it happily or unhappily. So what I'm going to do today is to share with you an experiment that we did with one of our children. And the child writer that I'm going to talk about today is Afif. Afif is our second child. He's got a older brother and a younger sister. So when we started this writing experiment or intervention, he was just over 7 years old. He was in year 2, And he continued this writing for 2 years, not happily, very reluctantly, but he continued for 2 years. Okay, so he's just finished his year 6 and he will be going to high school, that is year 7, later this month. So this experiment is by Afif, who was the subject or the object of this writing, family writing intervention. So I'm going to share with you how he responded to this experiment, how he responded to this family writing intervention. Okay, so let me give you an outline of the talk so it is easy for you to follow. So I will start with the what and the why. So what is the intervention that we are talking about? As I said, this is a writing intervention, family writing, informal intervention. And I will also explain why we were interested in this particular intervention, why writing, why in the family. Okay, and followed by that, I will be introducing some of the concepts which will help to frame the talk today. And these concepts will be drawn from the education literature as well as applied linguistics and sociolinguistics literature. Followed by that, we will take a look at the samples, his writing samples, which will be the main focus, of course, and main interest. So I will present an analysis, a very selective analysis of his writing samples to highlight some of the key issues. Okay, and after that, we will try to go beyond this one child experiment. In other words, we will think about, are there any lessons that we can take from this particular experiment that we are talking about? And then I will finish off with some remarks at the end. And then, of course, there will be time for questions and comments. Okay, so to tell you the what, as you can see from the title, the first part of the title, which is learning to write, the what is actually learning to write. In other words, it's about the intervention. It's the intervention, and as such, it actually reflects the parental perspective. So this is our perspective. We thought that he needed to improve his writing. So that is our perspective. And we thought that, you know, it will actually be helpful for him. He needed to improve his writings. So that's our perspective, the parental perspective. Okay, and then the more important part is, of course, the second part of the title, which is writing to resist. Okay, and this is actually his response, Afif's response to the intervention, you know, how he responded to this intervention. So you can see there are two sides, something that was arranged for him, the intervention, and how he responded to the intervention. So this presentation is mainly about looking at his writings and how he responded to this intervention. Okay, now to explain the why we were interested in this particular intervention. To explain this intervention, I will have to refer to two sets of factors. The first set of factors refers to the global. So globally speaking, as we all know, writing is a critical literacy skill. This is an important skill in all sorts of ways. I don't have to go into the details. But at the same time, we are also concerned about children's writing ability and performance. So for example, in the Australian context, we have a national assessment program. It is called NAPLAN, National Assessment Program, Literacy and Numeracy. And this assessment program is for primary and secondary level students. Students' test performance over the years shows that they have actually poor writing and they are not improving their writing. So that's one of the motivators for undertaking this particular intervention. And we also know that this is more or less the case in other societies as well. So for example, if you think about Bangladesh, we know that there are concerns about children's writing. Okay, and given these concerns, there are discussions and debates about, improving children's writing by undertaking different kinds of interventions, so whether we are talking about the interventions at a school or outside a school. So these are the global factors. And then there are also a set of local factors, and these factors are related to the subject of the intervention. That means Afif, the child writer that we are talking about. Okay, so first of all, Afif actually had a delayed speech development. He was not able to speak properly even when he was 4 years old. And as parents, we were really concerned about him. Once he started schooling, we thought that maybe we need to intervene and we need to, give him some extra help so that he can catch up with other children at a school, so he's not, falling behind other children at a school. Okay, the second factor is related to his language identity. Afif has English as his dominant language, so EDL, English as a dominant language. But of course, he is not a native speaker of English, and that is an argument that I would put forward. So even though he did all literary activities through English, he was not a native speaker, and that is because of the linguo-cultural background or the foundation that he had, that he was exposed to, particularly at home and in the home environment. Okay, and finally, our beliefs, our language ideology and education ideology also played a role in undertaking this particular environment. As parents, we thought that it is important for children to have an opportunity to develop their writing life. Some scholars have argued that, we should have, children should be exploring their writing life. So WLC is an interesting idea that has come forward from some of the advocacy of writing scholars. Okay, now to give you some details about the intervention, the family intervention that was undertaken. Okay, so the intervention started on the 4th of August 2016 when Afif was in year 2. He was just over 7 years old. Okay, so a Word file was opened for him on a desktop computer at home. So he was writing on the computer, and he was required to write a short text every day on any topic that he likes. So there was no imposition, so he could write on anything. Initially, he was asked to write just 5 sentences, but later on, we asked him to write a bit more. So he was given a new target of writing 20 sentences. Okay, and there was no audience, specific audience for this particular writing. We told him that no one is going to read it, no one is going to evaluate the writing, no one is going to give you feedback. You just keep writing, and no one is going to read it. So don't worry, just keep writing. But of course, he didn't like it. And I will share with you his own comments in how he responded. So he didn't like it, and he needed reminders on a regular basis to do the writing. Okay, he was kind of dragging, and then finally he stopped writing completely on the 16th of January 2018. By then, of course, he has produced 205 texts. Which is equivalent to a corpus of 25,000 words. And so we are going to look at some of these texts that is produced to understand how he responded to the intervention that we undertook for him. Okay, so to think about how he responded to the intervention, we would argue that he was actually resisting. So he actually wrote to resist, not writing to learn. So that's the argument that we are making here in this presentation, that writing, he didn't write to learn, but to resist. And he was resisting so that he could assert his self and his subjectness and his freedom. So he was, the writing intervention was seen as some sort of an imposition by him. It actually affected his sense of self or his freedom. But of course, he couldn't say no. There was sort of, parental he had some sort of obligation, but of course, he found a way of resisting. So we can see this resistance coming in many different ways in his writing. We will look at the examples as we go on. So you can see, if you look at one text that he produced on the 22nd of May, 2017, you can see clearly how he was resisting. I do not like writing at all. My father makes me do it a lot. I have to do a 20-sentence paragraph about something. And it doesn't always have to be interesting. Writing isn't very fun or interesting. It's completely boring. And I don't like it. And I don't think anyone likes it. Then I like you if you don't like this. Telling me you like it and me not like you. So you can see the kind of language that he's using. It's devastating, it's stressing. If this happens to everyone, everyone deserves better. And me also includes everyone. Everyone equals everyone. And everyone, okay. So you can see, this is not the typical kind of school writing. It's very unique in a way, and it shows his resistance. And it is also, you can see the dialogic character. He's also creating an imaginary reader and sharing with that reader that if you don't like writing, then I will like it. But if you like writing, then I'm not going to like it. So this is, of course, his direct resistance. He is directly resisting. We can see his resistance. But what we will do in the analysis part of the presentation, we will look at his indirect resistance. What are the indirect ways he actually resisted the intervention? Okay, so let me now share with you some concepts and ideas that can be used to frame his response, his reaction to the imposition, the intervention. Okay, and first of all, I would like to draw on Gerd Biesta's 3 domains of purpose of education. Okay, Biesta argues that unlike other professions, education actually has multiple purposes, and he talks about 3 purposes in the main. First one is qualification, and this is easy to understand. We talk about the aim of education is to give knowledge and skills to children. Another purpose is called socializations. So we talk about, representation of cultures, traditions, values, so on and so forth. So children are exposed to those traditions and expectations, social expectations and norms. So for example, in the context of Bangladesh, if we think about the goal of education, we have a lot of emphasis on Mukti Juddher Chetona, for example. Okay, and then he also talks about subjectification as an important goal of education. And in this presentation, I'm actually drawing on this particular concept, subjectification. Subjectification, simply speaking, it refers to freedom. It refers to our sense of self, pursuing our own way, as I will explain. Okay, so if we look at these 3 purposes, qualification and socialization, these 2 concepts actually uphold external perspectives. So these are actually coming from the school, it's coming from the society, from the nation or the nation state, for example. So these are the external perspective. Subjectification is actually the learner's own self and freedom. So it is related to the self of the learner. Okay, okay. So subjectification refers to the existence of the child, of this child as subject of their own life. So Biesta is talking about a particular kind of freedom, and this freedom allows you to be subject of your own life. You are not going to be an object of educational intervention. Now imagine the situation here. So the intervention that we are talking about actually placed Afif or turned him into an object of intervention. So this is actually affecting his sense of self or his freedom. So resistance would actually allow him to be a subject of his own life. So that is how we are trying to understand it. So subjectification is actually about being a self. It's about freedom as human beings. It is about the ability, or it is refers to the freedom to act as well as to refrain from action. So it is not just doing, but also the freedom not to do anything. So as I said, it is something that is inherent, coming from yourself. It is not about identity. It is not about subjectivity. It is not about taking responsibility. So as Biesta argues, subjectification is not the question of who I am. So that means not about identity, but the question of how I am. So it's the question of how I am, how I exist. That is to say, the question of how I exist, how I try to lead my life, how I try to respond to and engage with what I encounter in my life. So this is the key part here. So when you are put into a situation, so when you encounter something, your response, how you respond, the freedom to respond reflects your sense of self. It refers to subjectification. In other words, you can choose whether you say yes or you choose to say no. So that is the encounter. That encounter it's the moment that will decide whether whether we have subjectification as the goal of education or not. But of course, if we look at subjectification in mainstream education, we will see that the kind of freedom that Biesta is talking about, that is actually denied. Educational processes do not promote the kind of freedom that Biesta is talking about. Think about your student. You are asking them to do something, and if they don't do it, how would you treat that student? So not doing something, not doing what we ask them to do, maybe in their own interest, maybe it may reflect, it may be an opportunity for them to be the subject of their own life. But then we will interpret it in a particular way. We will say that, oh, you are going to fail, and so on and so forth. So in other words, learning and achievement in the school context means to conform. We ask our students to obey and to act. In other words, it's hardly about resistance or refusal to act. So we don't allow this kind of freedom. But of course, the particular kind of intervention that we are talking about, Afif created for himself that kind of environment, that kind of situation where, he actually resisted. So he didn't resist to act. He probably, he didn't want to do it, or he thought that, he couldn't do that. So, but he acted to resist. In other words, although he was reluctant to be part of the intervention, he ultimately agreed. But he also, that agreement, that doing doesn't mean that he was convinced, fully convinced. So he actually took the activity as a way of resisting the imposition. So even though he didn't say no directly to the imposition, he actually said no by doing what he was asked to do. So in that sense, that is actually more interesting. And this resistance reflects his pursuit of self and sense of freedom from parental imposition. So he probably saw the intervention as a parental imposition, and that's why he resisted by means of writing. So writing for him was a tool for resistance to the parental imposition. Okay, I will also draw on a few other important concepts to make sense of Afif's resistance. One important concept is what is called linguistic transgression. So linguistic transgression is when you are resisting, transgressing the official language, language of school, as well as the way and the conventions of using language. In other words, this is an example of deliberate deviation. Professor Shaila Sultana has been doing some work on linguistic transgression with reference to tertiary level students coming from English medium and Bangla medium students. So we will see in Afif's writing linguistic transgression. So he's actually transgressing the norms, the expectations, you know, the grammar, all the secretarial aspects of writing, for example, spelling, punctuations, uppercase, lowercase, and particularly when you are writing on the screen, maintaining a space. So all those conventions is, so we can see transgression. Okay, the second concept is linguistic border crossing or translanguaging. An important concept which is increasingly becoming important. So we will see that he is actually denying the borders or the boundaries of languages. Okay, so he is treating languages as sort of fluid resources. Okay, so he's in a way disinventing our established understanding of languages. He's also reinventing language in a way. And that is reflected in his linguistic border crossing or translanguaging. And finally, and most importantly, we can also see lots and lots of examples of what is called language play. Language play. So language play, David Crystal has written a lot about language play. So it refers to the playful or ludic function of language. Simply speaking, language play means manipulating language. That means bending and breaking the rules of language, the ways, the established rules of language. So we will see lots of language play in his writing. Okay, language play, as scholars have argued, is actually a common feature of children's language use, particularly their verbal communication. But of course, if you look at the school language, there is no place for language play. But this particular context of intervention, it was a unique context. So Afif was able to play with the language a lot. And he did that as an act of resistance, as an act of linguistic transgression. Okay, so, by listing these important concepts, I'm not trying to give you the impression that these concepts were used separately or independently. No, they actually work together. But for convenience, I thought that maybe I could just present them separately so you have an understanding. Okay, so before we take a look at the examples of his writing, maybe I can give you an overview of the content of his writing. That means what he wrote, what are the issues, what are the topics, ideas that we can see in his writing. So basically, Afif wrote about his small universe. Okay, and in this universe, we can see, a representation of his self. He talks about his own self, siblings, family, friends, school, holidays, learning, socializing. So he talks about all these things. The main genre that he uses is actually recount. So he is found to recount activities and people. So he talks about his family members, his friends, and other people. So recount is the main genre. Okay, some of the ideas and thoughts and feelings that he talked about were predictable. We could predict as parents, but many of them were actually unpredictable. So in a way, this was actually an interesting experience for us because we were able to know more about the child and his own thoughts, his thoughts and ideas, how he sees life, how he sees family, friends, so on and so forth. Okay, and of course, resisting norms and conventions is something that was a running thread. So we can see, this resistance running across almost all the writings that he did. Okay, let's take a look at the first text that he produced on the first day, which is the 4th of August, 2016. Okay, so he says, Nazifu is sometimes very naughty. Nazif is his older brother, but of course, he's given a special name to every member of his family. So he's called Nazifu. Nazifu is sometimes very naughty. Other times he's a good boy. I'm a good boy. So this is self-representation, you can see. Bichifi is funny. Bichifi, this is my name, his father's name, special name that he's given. And then he says, warning, Buri is hurty when she is angry. Buri is the younger sister. And you can see hurty is the linguistic creativity. That means the capacity to hurt. So Buri is hungry, is hurty when she is angry. So if Buri becomes angry, she can actually hurt. And note the word warning. So warning here, he's actually doing more than one thing in writing. So writing is not simply an expression of ideas or representation of things. Writing also means action. So he's also warning, giving a warning to the potential reader. Okay, you have to understand that Buri, don't mess with Buri. She can be hurty when she's angry. Okay, so now let's look at the examples of his resistance. The first way to understand his resistance is by looking at the genre choice, the genres that he chose. And as I pointed out earlier, recount is the common genre that he used in his writing. So here I have given you, I have included only a few examples. So you can see all of them start in the same way, examples of recount. Today we had guests coming to our house. Today we saw a snake. Today I went to school. Today I went to school. So he is actually using recount genres, and I would argue that this is actually the easiest genre to implement. So he is not making any effort. He's not doing thinking. He's not doing any planning. He's just writing whatever comes to his mind. He is taking the easiest way. And that can be interpreted as writing not to learn, but just to fulfill the demand, the parental demand that he keeps writing. So that's how we can interpret his genre choice. Okay, now let's look at the examples of the resistance, different forms of resistance. First one is the linguistic transgression, as I said. Okay, let's look at the example of the text that he wrote on the 18th of August, 2016. Okay, again, he's talking about his sister, Buri, is sometimes naughty. She's my sister. I like her, she likes me. She plays on my iPad. Probably he doesn't care about spelling, so he would never go back and correct his writing. And he says, dun dun, I play with her. Yay. So what he's doing here is, you can see, apparently this doesn't look like language. So even though he was supposed to produce language as parental expectations, he's actually transgressing, he's giving us something else. So this is not school language, this is not official language. So in that sense, it is transgression. Okay, and then if you look at the second example on the, in this slide, which was written on the 30th of October, 2016, this is more interesting. So he's running out of topic, so he needs a topic for his writing. So he says, can you give me a topic? Can you give me a topic for me for this writing, please? I can't think of anything. Really, I have used a lot of my ideas. I have got great friends. Will you be like them, please? Yay! Thanks. Thank you so much. So what is it? Say it. Why aren't you saying it? Get out of here. Come on, you told my parents, I told your parents. So you can see, what would you expect as a teacher, as an educator, as a parent, to your children to write? So you can see that he's actually not doing what you would expect him to write. And here you can see the dialogic character of his writing. He's creating an imaginary friend, and he's asking that friend to give him a topic because he's in trouble. He doesn't have, he's running out of ideas, so he needed ideas to write. Okay, another example of linguistic transgression. In the examples in his writings, we can see, he uses different varieties of languages. So robot language, he also talks about pirate language. So this is his example of robot language. So in that sense, this will be an example of linguistic transgression. So he says, do you like 60 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 12 o'clock? Should I get rid of 60 o'clock? I won't, unless you want me to. You do, but I don't want to. Yeah, I'm not getting rid of it. Fine, I will. Bib, bob, boop, keep, del, gag, fort, GFGD, yep, now it's done. It was a special robot sign language. So he's saying that it's special robot sign language. But of course, this is not the school language. school, his teachers won't appreciate this kind of language. Again, you can see an example of linguistic transgression here. Okay, and then linguistic border crossing. That means challenging the boundaries of language, treating different languages fluid, not maintaining, not respecting boundaries. If we look at this example on the 8th of April 2017, so he says, I know around 20 words in Bangla and I will translate them. Nak means nose, poka, insects, pipra, ants, dat, teeth, Ami, myself, to me, you, shak, spinach, though it whole means leafy vegetables. Dishan, should, puku means but. I'm not trying to be rude though, okay? Putul, doll. My sister has like 13. She goes crazy on dolls and she wants like 5 more already. She mostly wants Barbie. Okay, so you can see, bringing Bangla in English. Again, this is not something that will be appreciated by school and school teachers. Okay, more interesting is the second example of linguistic border crossing in this slide. And it was produced on the 6th of March, 2017. Afif goes to a madrasa where he learns Arabic. He reads the Quran, he memorizes chapters of the Quran. So he says, last week I was working on a surah called Surah Al-Adiyah. It has 11 verses. These are the verses. Every surah starts with this, but it is not a verse, which is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal-adiyati dabha fal-muriyati qadha fal-mughirati subha fa-atharna bihi naqa fa-wasatna bihi jama'. So to him, this also counts language and it can be included as writing. So, I can recite all of it. This week is Zilzal, so he's talking about another surah, though I don't know this one. So you can see a linguistic border crossing. Most interesting is, of course, the language play. So how he is breaking rules, bending rules in many different ways in this writing. There are many examples of language play in his writing, and I will show you just a few. So if we look at the one on that he wrote on the 1st of October 2016. So he said, this is a challenge, okay or okay? I think okay. Which do you want to pick? Quickly, the okay, I will use it. Okay, is that better? Well, I still think okay is the best. Okay, I'll stop. See, I said okay in the last sentence. I'll stop, okay. So you can see he is actually playing with language all the time. And his intention is simply to fill the space. So he has to write 20 sentences. That's what he's doing without caring for learning, without doing a lot of thinking. Okay, the second one is even more interesting. Today I went to school, okay. It's not hum day, today it's Monday and I don't need to pay, so I can just lay and I can play. Hey, I don't wanna do that. I want your cool hat. I'm not good with a bat, I'm good with the hat. So pat your hat. So you should do that. Don't doubt or you are out. And I'm gonna shout and I've got a pouch. You don't need to crouch. If you do, ouch. I've got some money. So you can have some pani. Pani means water. Okay, a couple of more examples of language play. So on the 5th of November 2016, so he's talking about eggs. What are eggs? Do you wonder what an egg is? Oh yeah, don't have any alcohol. So you can see how he's making connections. White is, so he's actually talking about the white of the egg, which is albumin, but it reminds him of alcohol. Oh yeah, albumin. And this is the cool name, albumin, coolest name ever. It's the best name you've ever heard. It's fun to say it. And the real pride, go, cool is Pokemon, go, yok, super vitamins, L, not as much. Okay, so you can see the play with language. Okay, and then the last one here, he's talking about his brother. I have a brother called Nazif, last name Hamid. I don't like him, not very much though. I still do like him a bit, but it's a bit. This is what matters, okay? That is what matters. Repeat that, repeat that is what matters. The word bit, okay, no more talking about the bit. It is an awesome. Okay, most people won't know what I'm talking about at all if they haven't read the first 10 sentences. So you can see he's actually stressing, he's actually inflating, he's just fulfilling the requirement of producing 20 sentences. And to him, a sentence is, it can be just one word, two words, phrases, so whatever. So he's simply putting, together whatever ideas come to his mind and just to fulfill the obligation. Okay, so now if we reflect on these writings examples, of course, there are too many, and I have just given you a very small sample of the whole corpus. So we can see that he's actually pursuing his own way and his authorial freedom, which can be related to subjectification. That means pursuing his own freedom, resisting, not complying with, or even if he's complying, apparently he's ultimately resisting. So we can see him flouting rules, conventions, and language norms very generously, without caring for any rules, any conventions, any expectations. So that's why it can be argued that he's not writing to learn, but writing to resist learning and imposition. So he considered the intervention as an imposition, he's actually resisting it. But then of course there is an, given this, if we understand these as an imposition for him, the intervention as an imposition, then there will of course be an ethical question. Is the intervention ethical? As parents, if if it is, if he believes that it is not, it doesn't maintain his interest, it doesn't maintain his self or his freedom, then there will be ethical questions. We could go into the details, but I won't because we don't have time, but definitely there is an ethical question. Okay, now how can we go beyond this particular one child experiment? What are some of the lessons that we can draw from it? And in thinking about that, in thinking about lessons that can be drawn, one question that becomes relevant to ask is, did the intervention fail? In other words, the aim of the intervention from the parental perspective was to help him to improve his writing. But did he improve his writing? Apparently, if you look at the examples of his writing, the way he was transgressing, the way he was playing with language, the way he was crossing borders, and if you produce all this kind of writing for a school, probably that won't help him at all. So apparently it's a failure, but actually probably it's not a failure. And you could actually argue that the intervention didn't actually fail. Okay, and I can answer that question from a number of perspectives. So first of all, we have done a corpus analysis of his writing samples, and we were able to identify a developmental trajectory based on the linguistic features. So we identified through corpus linguistic analysis, we identified 81 linguistic features, and which were divided into 4 groups. And these 4 groups actually show a developmental pattern over time. So there is sort of a longitudinal development, if you like. So from that perspective, there was actually a development. Okay, we can also understand the development if we simply compare the first text that he wrote and the last one that he wrote. So this is this last text, which was produced on the last day, the 16th of January, 2018. Okay, here, he didn't write a recount. He wrote a review of some of the books, the Roald Dahl books that we wrote. He's actually an avid reader. He reads widely, and he has read all the Roald Dahl books. And here you can see he's talking about, he's actually doing a review of all the books, the Roald Dahl books that we read. On my review of the Roald Dahl books, I will talk about my opinions of the book, my thoughts on them, and about the characters. So here at the end, we can see that he is actually coming in line with parental expectations, school expectations, teacher expectations of writing. Okay, so it can be argued that he's actually improved his writing against his own will, even though he was trying his best not to, not to do his best. We can see that somehow he's actually, there is a pattern that shows that he's actually improved. And we can also understand his achievements, writing achievements, by considering other factors. So, for example, the writings show the development of his language and metalinguistic awareness. And this is easy to understand because you can resist norms only if you know the norms. Okay, so when he's resisting, he's actually, or transgressing, he actually knows what is, what the rules are. And, so in that sense, it actually gave him an awareness of language and also metalinguistic awareness. So these are actually important skills for doing writing. And he also has skillful control over writing, his writing self and voice. So he's actually a good manager of his authorial voice. He's managed his voice very well. And we can also see when we look at the writings that he's actually discovered his own self. He's asserted his self, his freedom. So in that sense, it is actually kind of a discovery for him. He has discovered who he is and how he exists through his writing. So in that sense, we can see these are also achievements. Okay, so these lessons, some of these lessons, when children resist, when they play with language, they can actually improve writing, the immediate goal of any intervention or in any instruction. So I have taken these lessons in teaching a group of students that I'm currently doing in Rangpur. So every week I teach a group of students in Rangpur. They're primary and secondary level students. I'm actually implementing language play with them. So in teaching these students, we have established some rules. I tell them that these are the rules for your writing. So you will do it in your own way. No one is going to give you topic. You choose your topic, you write it any way you like. No rules, break rules, create new rules. Take it as a fun. Don't take it seriously. Don't care about others. You shouldn't have any hesitations, no inhibitions. Resist, challenge, ignore rules. Don't worry about rules. You reveal your thoughts. And of course you can't copy because, when you are registering, you can't copy. And you can flate, you can exaggerate, you can play with language in any way you like. And this is one of the examples of those Rangpur children. And this is produced by a year 6 student, and I'm really impressed. And here I can see how when they're actually being, when they're being themselves, how they can actually be more productive, how they can be more genuine and also come up with ideas that are original, and that actually shows a development as a writer, for example. So here, this writer is talking about their experience traveling in a microbus. Traveling by microbus means the last row seats are ours, so it's a family trip. Our means children in our whole family, but it is not sad news for us. It is a matter of fun to us. But the other people's situation becomes like Obostar, Barota, Baja. We don't like to be seated the whole time in micro. Whenever we find a crooked road, we stand up and then we start O, E, O. Then we sit down and the threat at the threat of someone big. So talking about the adults. Then it starts again. You see a crooked road and again sit down and stand up, again sit down. Some get tired of doing this, so on and so forth. So you can see they are actually this particular writer, and I can see similar kinds of creativity from a few other students as well. So they are actually producing something that is their own, and they are actually showing awareness of language, metalinguistic awareness, which are important resources for writing. Okay, I'm mindful of the time, I would just make a few concluding remarks before finishing. So children could be allowed to explore their writing life at home, at a school. So if we want to know how they would write, what they would write, whether there would be anything surprising, whether we could predict things, so on and so forth. We can actually give them an opportunity. Of course, they may resist, but then, we can work it out in a way, that will allow them to pursue their own interest. We can let them play with language and resist norms. And this is not just at home. Probably this is okay to do it at school as well. And we should allow them to discover self, freedom, and the writing self. Okay, and if we do that, maybe it will be a win-win situations for all parties. We as parents, teachers, educators, and also as children, the writers themselves. Okay, thank you. I'll stop here, and you may have many questions. We may take a look at those questions or any comment that you may have. Okay, thank you.
It was
so
a
thank
very
you, Obaid. That
intriguing
was amazing.
presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shamil
Great.
sir, please go ahead.
No, I was fascinated, and I was thinking of James Joyce, and I was thinking of Portrait of the Artist as a young man, and how Stephen captured the sound of language. So the language play that you mentioned. So I'm just curious, what punishment you had for Asif, if he was not writing.
Okay.
But because at times he seemed scared, and at times he felt
yes.
pressure.
Okay. Yeah, okay. This is really interesting, and I think this is also an important question. We take parent-child relationship for granted, but I think this particular intervention, it gave us an opportunity to revisit, that taken for granted relationship. Okay, so from our perspective, we thought that what we were doing was the right thing. We were helping him. Okay, so we never thought that we could be, tiger parents, tiger mother or tiger dad, no. Okay, so we, you try to, convince him in different ways. Okay, this is important for you to write. And one of the things that I used to tell them all the time is writing is power, writing is power. Okay, but of course they are not convinced all the time. So sometimes you have to say, oh, you have to do it, you haven't done it. But then of course, they will interpret it in a particular way. So we never did any physical punishment. But of course, the demand itself, was interpreted in a particular way. And that also helps us to understand, parent-child relationship. So often we take it for granted, but we now have more sensibilities about this relationship. How we can engage with them. So we're talking about sort of ethical issues here, in a way. Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah.
No, and on the same note, so the ethical issues like, this sibling rivalry, and that got exposed through this writing. And so how do you feel about it? When you have the dynamics at work, and because of that writing, so somebody has spoken up the mind. So it becomes kind of confessional writing. Because in creative writing class, we do automatic writing and free writing in order to force your subconscious mind to come out, right? So you're doing a similar thing, but here, you're doing it, with a child who is yet to be, corrupt by the world, right? And that's where it gets even more interesting, because you're seeing innocence incarnate, as if you are conjuring innocence out of it. And some of the sounds that were being produced, everyone, becoming everyone, so maybe the multicultural experience is coming into play, some of the sounds, the accents, that were also becoming visible. And so the Arabic lesson and the madrasa, the rote learning experience, that was adding another dimension to it. So here is a child dealing with 4 languages, so Bangla, English, maybe Aussie, English, Arabic, and then own nonsense language, or his own nonsense language, and discovering your own self. So it's fascinating. So I really enjoyed that. but
Oh, thank you. Thank
I
you.
was also intrigued by the ethical component of it.
Thank you.
So it was a very intriguing presentation. Thank you very much, Dr. Obaidul Hamid, for sharing your interesting research with us. And I personally found it fascinating, and Afif's writing made me smile throughout the presentation. It was really, really interesting. So we will open the floor for more question and answer,
Yep.
and you can unmute yourselves and you can write your questions in the chat box as well, if you prefer it that way. So,
But Obaid, we also need to ask that, it's really late. It's probably
yeah,
11:06.
No, it's
So how
fine.
much
Yeah,
time
it's
do you
fine.
have,
Yeah, well,
before you
it's
doze off?
fine. Yeah, it's fine. I'm happy to take any questions,
Okay,
comments.
good.
yeah. I think
Sure.
there are a few
Great.
comments, Yeah, I
Yes.
think one from Hamidur Rahman sir. Sir, would you like to make the comment yourself, or?
No, I mean, very important, very important, because you see the practice in our country that uh, the the essay topics, SSC, HSC,
Yes.
are very predictable. You memorize 3 essays, you're sure to get one. It doesn't lead anywhere. There's
Yes.
no real opportunity for learners to write independently. So this is a very crucial thing, and we have to somehow, some way, introduce the
Yes.
practice, and that is the only way of developing writing. There's no other way. But
Yes.
I mean, the problem is that we work with so many constraints in our country that, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, all the time you're thinking about changing, reforming, doing better. But again, you see, because of the circumstances, we always stop and we can't go forward. That is the tragic situation. But maybe the future would be better. But let's talk about it. Let's work for it. Let's propagate it. Thank you, Obaid Hamid,
Yeah.
for your.
Okay. 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 Thank you very much, sir.
So are there any more questions?
Yeah, Obaid by Mahmoud here.
Yes.
Such a wonderful paper you have presented. I just wanted to know whether you're interested in comparing his writing, like what he's doing at home, and his what he's doing, the way he writes in school. So
Okay.
in the beginning of, like, in 2016, how he wrote in school, and you can
Yes.
whether you're interested to look at how it actually improved, or whatever happens to his writing in 2018
Yes.
in school and at home. um,
Okay.
I was just wondering whether you're interested in this kind of comparison.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Thanks for this suggestion. I think. Yeah, that will be an interesting direction to take as sort of next step. Um, um, Definitely, we can think about that. But as far as I know, in the school, as we all know, at a school, they will be teaching a particular set of genres. So, for example, persuasive writing, expository writing, and of course, writing in the school context means obedience, conformity. In terms of the genre, in terms of the topic, in terms of language conventions. So yeah, if I compare what he wrote here as part of this intervention and what he wrote for a school, it will be different. Okay, and that's why many scholars have argued that, particularly, David Crystal, so he's argued that, playing with language is something common, something natural for children. But once they enter the classroom, that playfulness is gone. So they are exposed to the language and language demands of the adult world. So we ask them to do, expository writing and then persuasive writing, so to them, these are sort of, just examples of conformity. Whereas what he did here, he was who he wanted to be. and we can see the beauty, you know, the playfulness, the creativity, you know. So when I was reading all the texts and coding them, annotating them, you know, it was such a pleasant experience, looking at how in so many different ways he was actually demonstrating his control over the writing, the language as a tool, and so on and so forth, and how he is grabbing ideas, things, resources from many different sources. He's using pirate language, he's using robot language, and not just, you know, he's using language to do many different things at the same time. It's really wonderful. And I was also pleased to see some of my Rangpur students doing the same thing. So we will keep going. I'm really optimistic that, you know, they are getting the message that language, you know, they don't have to conform. They can also use the language as a tool to mean what they want to mean, to do what they want to do with the language. You know, they don't have to live other people's life with the language. They can be who they want to be. But thanks for the suggestions. Yeah, we will definitely think about it.
Obaid, can I share a philosophical observation?
Sure, yes.
That is, you know, that I have been working with linguistic transgression for the last 10 years. My PhD was about linguistic transgression, and I have a specific term for that transgression. What I have seen and observed in the last 10 years, that is, the transgression, and I think Jenks has also mentioned that transgression becomes meaningful, interesting, because there is a norm. If there is no norm,
that's
there
right.
is no
Yes.
So I think, and this norm will be changing. So perhaps we can play around with these norms and then allow our students to transgress, but there will be new forms of form and normativity which they will be transgressing. So without norm, there is no transgression.
That's right. Yeah, definitely. Yes. Yeah. And that's why I say that, you know, when you can't transgress by ignorance.
Yes.
You know, yeah, you know, if you are, you know, if you are acting blindly, so that is not an example of transgression. So in Afif's case in particular, so he knew, you know, what the norms are. You know, I can see that from his writing, but he was sort of deliberately and generously flouting those norms. Yeah. Thanks for that comment. Yes.
Excuse me, ma'am, can I have your word, please? This is Shams from Daffodil International University.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid. I'm so pleased to be here and listening to a new dimension of language learning. Normally, I don't see much of the research in this field, which you have done, kind of with your own son. And I'm sorry for that little Afif, and also I'm proud of him for two reasons. I'm not going to tell those reasons, but I've got some mixed feeling about your presentation. I think at one point of time, my internet went off, missed some bits of your delivery. But I remember that you said that Afif, in the end, improved his language, number one.
Yes.
But then you focused on the point subjectivification of the learner.
Yeah.
Now, you subjected himself in learning how to write or improving his learning.
Yes.
Now, if we agree with subjectivification, actually, then where do you stand on your claim that you found out in the end his language improved? This last text you were reading out. Number one, it was subjectivification and a kind of torture, quote unquote, But then was this torture necessary for learning that skill, vital skill of writing? Number one. Number two, is this subjectivation, does this subjectivation continues in the formal settings of learning a language in anywhere of the world? Does it exist or does it not? If it does, then we are subjectivating all our learners, young learners, all over the world. Now, if it is the truth, my 2 points, then subjectivation is a necessity for learning language. Is that right or wrong? And I feel tempted to refer to that old saying, men are born free, but everywhere in the society they are in chains.
Yes.
So are our children in chains of subjectivation while we think about their learning, reading, writing, or whatever? What is your take on that?
Okay. Thank you very much, Sarah, for very perceptive observations and comments. Yes, when I was talking about subjectification, yes.
Subjectification, yeah.
Yeah, we can refer to the quote that is just mentioned that, you know, man is born free, but everywhere he's in chain. So it's actually refers to that kind of inherent human freedom. And yes, I would agree with you that schooling by definition means sacrificing our freedom. But of course, it is guided by a particular ideology. So we as adults believe that, you know, children are not complete human beings. They have to grow up as adults, and you know, so we have to, you know, give them the knowledge, the skills, and the resources, and so on and so forth. And so that has to happen at the cost of the freedom that they are born with, so on and so forth. Okay, so this idea of subjectification applies at a philosophical level. Okay, so you may like to read the article by Gerd Biesta, where he talks about these three domains of purpose of education. He actually gives an example. So he refers to, he talks about one school principal in England in the early 20th century. In that school, there was a boy who was actually notorious, and he wouldn't take part in learning and so on and so forth. So one day the principal asked him, "What do you want? What would you like to do?" And then the boy said, "I would like to break all these teacups and saucers." And then the principal said, "Go ahead and do it." And then he did it. Okay, he broke all the teacups, and so when we talk about freedom, we are talking about freedom not just to act, but also to not to act. So in this particular case, you know, it's kind of pursuing your sense of self, you know, but of course, you know, this is not sort of normal kind of situation. But anyway, the other question, the other point that you make is I'm saying that Afif actually improved his writing. There is, in terms of the parental expectations, the expectations of the school, the expectations of society, you know, and here we are talking about particular kind of criteria. So even in terms of those criteria, we can also see the improvement, because ultimately underlying the writing ability, there are some key requirements. And when people are actually manipulating the language, they will actually develop those the skills to fulfill those requirements. So in that sense, we can see improvement in his writing. Okay, the other point that you made about whether we have this kind of approach to language learning. I can't think of an approach that is based on resistance alone. But we do talk about, engaging with students, listening to the students, so on and so forth.
And translanguaging, the movement for translanguaging. Yes, you can.
Exactly. So now we are talking about, particularly, scholars are now talking about not respecting the traditional boundaries of languages, how people can actually come up with their own sense of self. They can demonstrate, their understanding and so on and so forth when we allow them to mix languages, bring in all linguistic resources that they may have. But I'm not familiar with any approach that draws on these ideas entirely for language teaching. Sorry if I haven't answered your question.
Wait, and thank you. It's very, very clear. But I'm sorry, madam, I'm taking another minute. Actually, I mean, all these things taken into consideration, that subjectification and also improvement and also freedom. Do you think these post methods? I was teaching in England for
Yes.
quite a while, for more than 2 decades, and a range from primary to tertiary. So when I was teaching in primary, these questions were raised, and they were getting tried to addressed in the staff meeting, induction, etc. So at that particular school, they went for freedom, not subjectification. Give freedom to all the students in reading, writing, and everything. Okay, and after a while, after a time, we saw improvement, equal improvement as before, without subjectification and freedom. They were reading whatever they liked, they were writing whatever they liked.
Yes.
So
yes.
from that experience, I feel tempted to think that these methods like community language learning, Suggestipedia kind of things, I tried them in my own class, my tertiary classes, and I think they work very well. Even using mother tongue sometimes. I don't use that normally in my lesson delivery, but sometimes when I tried, it worked. So what do you think about these methods like Suggestipedia, community language learning things? What is your take on that?
By post method, are you talking about Kumara Vadivelu in particular?
Kumara Vadivelu and the rest. There are few advocates on that. But then Kumara Vadivelu, they are concentrating on CLT, modification of CLT, etc., etc. Well, yes, he's in it, bringing in the self of the learner into the curriculum. That is it. Yes, you're right.
Well, all I can say is definitely there is benefit. There is pedagogical benefit in granting freedom to our students, but of course it will depend on the context, and it may also depend on students that we talk about. But I think we can agree on one thing, that if students fail to engage, if students can't relate to what they're doing, then that is not going to help them in any way. Okay, so ensuring their engagement may mean that we have to give them some freedom. So the article that I'm talking about, so the boy was given this freedom to break the teacups, and he did. And then next thing the principal did, he take out his watch and he said, "Okay, break it now." This he didn't break it. He didn't break it. He gave it back to the principal, and then so he left the school, and then he came back the next day, and then he approached the principal. He said, can you give me a job in the carpentry, in the school carpentry? And then he said, why? Why do you need a job? And he said, I want to buy a new set of teacups that I broke yesterday. So he's now a different man. He became a different man.
Yeah.
Okay, so he took responsibility. So when you talk about subjectification, we are talking about encounter, how we encounter, a particular encounter and how we respond. Okay, I think apparently, particularly when you think about this neoliberal environment, there is no room for freedom. But if we listen to educational theories and philosophers of education, they would still argue that, freedom is something that is missing from our education system, from the educational processes
On the whole.
that we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, Obaid. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm pleased to be
sir.
Here. Good luck.
May I
Good
add
luck
something?
always.
Yes, sure.
This reminds me of an experiment carried out by A.S. Neil in England. It's in a school called Summerhill, where he experimented with his freedom. Students were not bound to go to any class, any lesson. They can do whatever they like. In the end, they got involved in different things, and they produced very brilliant students in England. At one time, you see, the government wanted to shut it down, but they couldn't because there's protests all around. So his example is perhaps the best example of freedom of learning.
Yes, thank you, sir.
I think that concludes our question answer session. So now I would like to request our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor and Head of the Department of English and Humanities, Dr. Shamshad Murtuza, to say a few words and offer his vote of thanks.
Thank you, Farzana, and thank you, dear participants, for those, intellectually stimulating questions. I think Obaid just lost his sleep, right? No, he's still awake.
That's fine.
No, so thank you for joining in from down under, and we deliberately had another Aussie for you to introduce, a scholar such as yourself. So thank you, Shaila, for the wonderful introduction, and you have, honestly put it, the way, all of you have grown together, those Aussie scholars. It's a rare admission, but after you have said it, I can see how all of you are contributing to this field of academia, knowledge and so forth. So really proud of you all, and especially Obaid, I have been following your career for quite some time now, and I've been chasing you for this particular event. I think you took almost 3 months to schedule this webinar. So that shows how busy and committed you are. And I'm really fascinated by what you're doing with the children at Rangpur. And I could visualize myself doing the same on a bus, whenever there was a road bump, jumping up and going back to the seat. And finally saying that, why did we arrive? That was mind blowing. So you enjoy the pain, and then when it ends, you say why did it end? It's almost like our webinar today. So we had such an interesting ride, and coming to an end, and we have to say why do we have to end? That's how it is. But this is 2021, and this is a new beginning, and I'm sure we'll be having more conversations of this nature. And it's interesting because we often draw kind of a লক্ষণ রেখা টেনে রাখি সাহিত্য ভাষার ভেতরে, যেটা কোনোভাবেই উচিত না. But so some of the things that we actually do in literature classes also, maybe we don't theorize it that much. For example, my own PhD was on shamanic poetry, and a group of poets who stretched the limit of language, so the language poets like Ron Sullivan and others. And they were inspired by Wittgenstein, right? So the limit of the language means the limit of the world. And that's exactly what you were trying to prove today. I felt bad for your son, because I wouldn't have appreciated such rigorous writing exercises. But having said that, have you factored in the age difference? Because when you say that, in 2 years, you were happy that, your son has met the parental expectations. But, by that time, like, 2 years have elapsed, and he has read a lot of Roald Dahl. Maybe he has picked up some of the syntaxes from his own reading also.
Yes,
So,
yes.
there are other factors and variables which we should consider before jumping into the conclusion that, he has developed or he has grown up. Because ultimately, there is an irony that he has learned, and Shaila actually hinted it. So you need to know the norms in order to break it, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
ultimately, you are conforming to another norm that you need to meet your parents' expectations. And once you have done that, maybe we'll break it. Like, you become a teenager, you start smoking, and smoking hash and whatnot. That is the
Yes.
another way of expressing yourself. But yeah, so this is mind blowing, and and even my dogs are, violating the norms. So thank you so much, Obai. Thank you everyone
Okay.
for joining in, and special thanks to the IT team for the tech support. Dr. Mahmoud Hassan Khan, Farzana, and whoever involved with the events committee. So they deserve a well round of applause. So we did quite a few webinars this term. So the new normal has given us this opportunity to reach out to our scholars, our mentors, our friends overseas, and try to bring them on a virtual platform so that we can, plug into their, brain and, learn from one another. So once again, thank you, Obaid, for this wonderful talk. And as I said, this is the beginning of a new journey in 2021. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the kind words. Okay. And thanks, everyone. Thanks, Hafsa. Thanks, Shalapa. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Maksud.
Thank you, sir.
So I would
Okay.
like to thank you all for participating in today's webinar and for making it so interactive. We would like to end this session today.